Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Monday, March the 3rd, 2025, and today we're going to talk about the importance of being challenged, irrigation advice, and some big old spring mistakes to avoid. So let's do it. All right, well, welcome to March, everyone. It happened. It changed from February to March just like that. I hope you all had a lovely weekend. I had a nice weekend myself, and it started on Friday, actually, when Hannah and I went to see the live taping of Kentucky Sports Radio. I've talked about this show before. This is like a local daily sports radio show. It was kind of somewhat the inspiration for this show, although it is, could not be more different. But anyway, they will do remotes sometimes in various locations all over the state. This one just happened to be at the new soccer stadium in Lexington for Lexington SC. So I figured, although I'll be purple for the rest of my life, I figured I would go and see the show, how they did it live, how they took questions, all that stuff, and then also check out the soccer stadium there. Hannah noted that if there had been some sort of farm involved somewhere, it may have been like the most made for me event ever. So it was awesome. It was a lot of fun. It was like they do like live call-in shows, like they take callers and stuff, which I've always wanted to do. It's a very impressive operation that they have going on. Maybe one day we will get to something where we can take callers. We'll see. I don't know. That'd be fun. On Saturday, we got the soccer fields all set up and ready to go. It was not an ideal weekend in sports for all of my teams, except for my Brighton and Hove Albion Seagulls, who continue to soar. 5 wins in a row is pretty fun. The soccer coaching season starts this week, so I am pumped. So perhaps more interestingly, at least for you all, it is March, but it is also the 100th episode of this particular show. That's roughly 300 different topics, roughly 30 hours of talking, almost every weekday for 5 months straight. What a wild ride it has been. Going back to those first episodes, I was like, well, what have I got myself into here with this thing? This is without a doubt the most ambitious project I've ever embarked on, and that's coming from someone who has started 4 full-blown farms and a media company. That said, I've started to really embrace and love this challenge. I think we all need to go through those occasional let's just say moly for our little listeners, those holy moly years where you are put into a position where it's sink or swim and you have to perform. Not to bring it all back to soccer, sorry, but I was watching the new Christian Pulisic documentary recently, and he was talking about how he moved to Germany to play for this elite academy for a famous soccer club called Dortmund, and how hard it was, how he didn't speak the language, and how hard the other players were on him because they didn't want him to succeed. They weren't passing to him and basically didn't want him to take their spot on the team. It was just a brutal year for him, but he stuck it out and will become, if he isn't already, one of the best American soccer players of all time. But it required him to go through that really hard period and embrace it. I remember when I was cooking, I went through a period like that where it was my first year at a real legit professional restaurant, and it was profoundly difficult. I felt completely dismantled after that year. Actually, in the first month, I felt completely dismantled. Frankly, I almost quit, but I decided to stick with it with some encouragement from my family and friends. Then at the end of that year, I realized how far I'd come, having just put my head down and kept working. Now, I'm not comparing this show to that or what Christian Pulisic went through at Dortmund. My challenge here is completely self-created and self-imposed, but rather that challenges like these are important. So long as you enjoy what you're doing and working towards, challenges are rewarding. They're fun. They're educational. And this show has presented a massive challenge to me that now I'm in the groove of and having fun with it. I've grown a lot from it, learned a lot in the process, picked up some efficiency tricks in editing, and picked up some interesting farming tidbits in the research I've got to do. Of course, the season hasn't started yet, so talk to me at episode 200, and we'll see how much I love these challenges then. I had no idea how a daily podcast would work, or frankly, how it would go over, but I knew that I personally love daily podcasts, like that Kentucky Sports Radio show that I went to see. And so shouts to all of you for all the comments and great questions and encouragement, and for watching and listening every day. I know the quality could always be better, and maybe one day it will be, and I guess that is part of the challenge. So anyway, cheers to the first 100, everyone. Let's see what the next 100 look like. Maybe better, maybe worse. We'll see. Now that the growing season is starting and soccer season, and I still haven't changed the oil in my tractor, but either way, challenge accepted. All right, we're going to take a quick break and with our new March sponsors, and then we'll talk about what to think about when designing an irrigation system. BRB. I'm going to tell you that I love you.
100 times a day. You'll get tired of my voice. That's how much I'm gonna tell you that I miss you.
Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by So Right Seeds. So Right Seeds is an heirloom seed company that offers fresh, high-quality, open-pollinated seeds. They have a great selection on their website of over 400 varieties, along with a planter's library with tips for growing. They offer cover crops and bulk packs of seed for sustainable home gardening. The instructions on the back of their packets have all the information you need to get started. Go to So Right Seeds, that's S-O-W, and use my discount code NOTILL for 15% off your order. That's SoRightSeeds.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Peaceful Heritage Nursery. If you're looking for hardy and resilient fruit trees, berry plants, or pawpaw trees, then check out Peaceful Heritage Nursery. Peaceful Heritage Nursery LLC is a mail-order nursery shipping premium quality fruit trees and berry plants across the USA. They specialize in resilient, non-GMO plant genetics for small growers. Their diverse selection includes berries, cold hardy figs, passion fruits, gumi, mulberry, and much more. They're famous for their diverse selection of premium quality grafted pawpaw trees. 5-star Google ratings and customer testimonials attest to their commitment to excellence in quality and service. Find them at peacefulheritage.com and join the mailing list. Once again, find them at peacefulheritage.com. Use the promo code NOTILL for 10% off your first order. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions now. Today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Nathan Leal Crisp, who asks, quote, when it comes to overhead irrigation, specifically outside, there are so many different designs, models, and other qualities related. As an example, I wouldn't think wobblers would work well with tall corn, especially if you're trying to water the corn and something behind it. There are many that might seem similar, but I've heard examples of overhead irrigation that lasts a few seasons, while others last 10 plus years and are still going strong. So I guess 2 questions for you. What sort of designs are better suited for a specific context and or crop? What types of qualities should be in an irrigation tool or setup for success? Oh, and is there a model that is going more capable of growing a wide variety of crops? Please get as nerdy as you would like. We appreciate the thoroughness. Also, Rocky Top, you'll always be. End quote. All right, great questions, Nathan, and thank you as always. Okay, so being that Kentucky swept Tennessee this year in the regular season, I'll be easy on the Rocky Top part of that comment. But as for the irrigation stuff, there's a lot there, so I will try to be as helpful as I can be and also give you my best piece of irrigation advice sort of towards the end of this segment. So Nathan gave the example of having corn in a plot and wanting to irrigate and wanting an irrigation setup that could potentially irrigate the corn while being tall enough to irrigate stuff on either side of the corn. This needs perhaps actually less of an irrigation solution than a garden planting solution. Like for instance, there are a few things that we do not really overhead irrigate on our farm, at least not once they are like really well established. So that would be like corn, tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, squash, that sort of stuff. No overhead irrigation for those crops once they're like fully growing. We are in a humid climate here and the leaf diseases love it. We personally go to places like the beach for vacation. Those diseases go on vacation to like the subtropics and tropics. This climate is a smorgasbord for fungal diseases and leaf blights, or a veritable smorgasbord if you want to get Templetonian about it. So we place those in plots where we can either dry farm them, which again, we're wet enough to do that, or where we can use drip tape instead of overhead irrigation. Basically, just block those sorts of crops together, which often works out because they are pretty much all heavy feeders. And then you can follow it with like a light feeder afterward. If that's not possible, you can get extenders, telescoping tripods, or even overhead structures for irrigation for things like wobblers. But the higher you get, the more irrigation you'll likely lose to evaporation or blowing away. So unless you have a lot of access to water, I wouldn't go too high. Generally, ideally, you can keep them low. You can also get ground sprinklers that send the water high enough into the air, like tripod sprinklers or circular sprinklers that sort of imitate the ancient dad dance move. So it's possible, but not ideal. to do it that way. The second question is what types of qualities should be in an irrigation tool or setup for success? Well, that really depends on what you're growing, how much irrigation you plan to be using every season, and also a lot of what your water flow and pressure are. Flow and pressure can be modified a little bit with things like booster pumps, digging a deeper well, using larger pipes, etc. But you don't need to do that until you know what you're working with. And in fact, it may not be a good idea to mess with those things at all in the long run. So I suppose that my answer to that is that you need to evaluate your water system before you can really even determine what you can use given your budget. Which brings me to my favorite piece of advice. Ask irrigation supply places if they will help you with your irrigation design. Irrigation, water pressure, all these things, these are pretty complicated ideas. So it's nice to have a professional who that's what they do. Assuming they're game to do that, they will ask you a bunch of questions, maybe ask for some drawings of your farm or your irrigation idea, and then give you a whole list of stuff to buy from them. Now, out of respect for the work they put in, you should buy it from them, even if they're giving you a bit of an upsell on certain things. My take is that it's a small price to pay for a consultation service like that. I would just call a few irrigation supply places in the area, lay out your needs, and then see if they'll help you kind of dial it in to make sure you get every piece and part you need. Because a lot of times you're like, oh, I needed an end cap for that, or I needed this filter and not that filter, or whatever. Like, it's good to get those details directly from somebody who knows what they're talking about. If you like that person, or if they just offer an irrigation consultation service, go with that. Indeed, having an irrigation consultant, even an established farmer, is not the worst idea either. Alternatively, there is a lot of rough information online to get the exact system you need. It just may take a lot of work on your end. Like with most things in farming / life, it either requires your own labor or paying for someone else's labor. Your call. And for me, whenever I can afford to hire a professional, I prefer that. But also, it could be a good challenge if you're into that sort of thing. It's kind of a theme today. Anyway, I know that's not a very satisfying answer, but irrigation is not something I can just say, buy this, you'll love it. Because as is the reality for everything in farming, it just depends on your context. Last thing I'll say, though, is that I do plan to modify our irrigation here in the coming months if I get the time. So definitely more on irrigation in the future. I will no doubt be talking about that when the time comes, because that's kind of my thing. I mean, not irrigation, just talking about stuff. All right, well, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, some spring gardening mistakes to avoid. I know them well. Be right back. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Harnwah Greenhouses. Harnwah Greenhouses has pioneered controlled environment agriculture since 1965, partnering with market gardeners and farmers across North America to deliver turnkey greenhouse solutions. Their unwavering mission is to support growers' success through innovation and expertise in design, manufacturing, and installation. Harnwah Greenhouses are engineered to withstand high wind and snow loads, providing optimal brightness, increased yields, rapid ROI, and long-lasting durability. With over 20,000 projects completed, they are more than a manufacturer. They are a trusted partner. Their structures foster sustainable, energy-efficient ecosystems that drive profitable, resilient agriculture. In 2025, Harnwah is introducing a new low-tech, high-tunnel model starting at just $2 per square foot, offering open field growers an accessible entry into controlled environment agriculture. Learn more at harnwah.com. That's HARNOIS.com. All right, back to the show. All right, so how about we kick off March with some important but general tips about what not to do going into the growing season if you want to have a successful spring, which you may be surprised to hear that signing up to coach 2 soccer teams is not on that list. But let's get to some of the things that are. Okay, so the first thing you have to be conscious of heading into your spring is not planting anything too early. I know we've already touched on this quite a bit, so no need to go too far down this rabbit hole, but outlier weather events like warm spells do not cancel our historical weather patterns. Yes, every single year has been on average warmer across the globe since the 70s, but averages mean that you can still have very cold days and nights, just that when all of them are added together, the sum is divided by the number of days. That number is higher than the year before, every single year. Now, I'm not saying that because I think adults need to understand how to do an average. I'm saying that just to point out that warmer years every year does not mean every day is just straight up warm, or that the frosts necessarily stop earlier or aren't as hard. So don't make assumptions and don't jump the gun. That's advice number 1. Number 2, don't get lazy about protecting crops, especially not tomatoes and peppers and basil, etc., that are not cold hardy. Just because the weather says it will be just above freezing does not mean it will be just above freezing on your farm. To repeat, if you look up the weather and it says it's going to be, 35 degrees in your local town, that does not mean it's going to be 35 degrees where you are. It could be 28 degrees where you are if you're in a low spot. Those temperatures are often taken and predicted for towns and cities, not rural low-lying areas where the temperature can be several degrees colder. Buildings and concrete, all that stuff, trap several degrees more heat, so the readings may not be the same for you as they will be in the city. This could also mean bringing plants inside from the greenhouse on really cold nights, so an extension of that tip would be to not plant more than you can protect. Like if you don't have ample row cover or ways to keep the plants alive down to a hard freeze, don't plant them. Keep them in the greenhouse if you can. Now, the nice thing about the spring is that, unlike the winter when the sun goes down at 5 p.m. or whatever and doesn't come up until 8 a.m., the period of time that the ground will stay out of warm sunlight is substantial. In the spring, the nights get shorter and shorter, so that period of a hard frost or freeze is generally a shorter window, meaning that if it is going to get down to close to freezing, it's not going to stay there for very long. Another tip would be to take advantage of the downtime. Like if you get a cold or wet or windy day where work is hard to do, find something to do that you will not want to do later when you're busy. Like an oil change on the tractor, fixing your irrigation, cleaning stuff off the ground. This is really just my list, but it's the last chance. Another thing that's important to keep in mind is that you have time. This one is big for me. It took me a long time to realize this. I am always having to remind myself that I have the time to take the notes I need to take and do the task right. There's this old adage in farming that there is never enough time to do it right the first time, but seemingly always enough time to do it again, or some variation thereof. Basically, instead of having to do something over again, just do it right the first time. Just go slow, make sure it gets done correctly. Also, with the notes thing, if you want to have a better garden plan next year, it requires you are vigilant this year in taking notes and tracking what you plant, when you plant it, all that stuff. Even if it's a single spreadsheet that includes what you planted when, how much you harvested when, you can go through that data next year and really start dialing things in. Anyway, I hope that's helpful for your spring, which I will remind you is not here yet for many of us, so relax. Enjoy your March. There's lots of basketball coming up. March Madness is here. I'm ready for it. Otherwise, I'm going to end it there. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors for the month of February and now for the month of March. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and the team at No-Till Growers. Also shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music you hear. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer at no-tillgrowers.com. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of March, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Papa John Misty. Good name. Stephen Garfinkel, Kelly Rose, Mark, and Martin Kumaru, and Bill Price. Bill, I had forgotten to mention your name last month. I must have missed it. My apologies there. If I ever do that, Patreon members, just send me a message on Patreon so I see it, and I will take care of that. My bad. Massive appreciation for your support, though, Bill. All right, so this is actually an opera. I mean, with a name like Papa John Misty, how can it not be a rock opera? Anyway, it's about it takes place in Seattle, and it's about how Seattle lost the Seattle Supersonics, the NBA team, but the rise of the storm. And also, there's kind of an undercurrent in this particular opera about how difficult and challenging of an environment it is to grow food and vegetables in Seattle because the rain, and I don't know, it's complicated. Actually, I don't know if that's true, but they do cram a lot into this opera, which I appreciate. Anyway, thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you tomorrow for Tuesday. It's a great day. One of those of the weekdays.